The chill seeped into my bones, a cold that no blanket could ever truly chase away. It wasn't just the fever, though that certainly played its part, turning my skin to fire and my insides to ice. It was the chill of neglect, the kind that settles deep in the soul and festers there. My breath rattled in my chest, each inhale a struggle, each exhale a whisper. The room was dark, lit only by the sliver of moonlight that dared to peek through the gap in the curtains. Outside, or rather in the next room, the sounds of celebration echoed. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. My sister's engagement party. How fitting. Another missed birthday, I thought. The bitterness of familiar taste on my tongue. I remembered being 8, the cake my mother had promised, never materialized. Instead, a hurried pat on the head and a reminder to be quiet, because my whining gave her a headache. "You're such a burden," she'd sighed, a sentiment that had become a constant refrain in my life. My gaze drifted to the peeling wallpaper, the pattern blurred by unshed tears. "Remember that time, Anna?" A voice whispered in my head, laced with sarcasm. "When you fell and broke your arm? Your brother called you clumsy, and your father just sighed and wrote another check. No hug, no kiss, just a bill." The fever pulsed, a wave of heat washing over me, followed by a shiver that racked my entire body. I tried to call out, to beg for some water, some medicine, some human contact, but my voice was a mere croak. They wouldn't hear me anyway. They never did. My parents were probably raising a toast, praising my sister's beauty and her soon-to-be husband's wealth. My siblings, no doubt, were reveling in the free food and drinks, oblivious to the fact that their sickly sister was lying just a wall away, burning up. 5 years, I thought, the number echoing in my mind. 5 years of whispered insults, of dismissive glances, of being treated like a ghost in my own home. 5 years of longing for a scrap of affection, a moment of genuine care. And for what? For a disease I didn't choose? For a weakness they themselves had nurtured with their indifference? The sounds of the party grew louder, the music swelling. It was a cruel symphony, a soundtrack to my demise. I closed my eyes, the darkness behind my lids no different from the darkness that was creeping into my heart. "This is it, isn't it?" I thought, a strange sense of detachment settling over me. "This is how I go. Forgotten, unloved." Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced my chest, a sensation akin to ice shattering. My breath hitched, and the room began to spin. The music faded, the laughter muffled, as if I were sinking into a deep, dark ocean. A sense of fading, of becoming less. Then, a blinding flash of light, so bright, so intense, that it obliterated everything else. My eyes fluttered open, disoriented. That was the first word that came to mind. Where was I? The room was familiar, yet different. Lighter somehow. And, was I warm? Truly deeply warm? Not just feverishly hot. I blinked, trying to clear the lingering fog in my brain. My old room, 5 years ago. That realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. 5 years. Before the fever. Before everything. I sat up slowly, cautiously. No wave of dizziness, no crippling weakness. Instead, I felt strong. My limbs were light, responsive. I flexed my fingers, marveling at the ease of movement. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet landing firmly on the floor. No wobble. No need to clutch at the nightstand for support. I stood up. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I stood up without pain. It was exhilarating. A slow smile spread across my face. A real smile, not the forced, weak imitation I'd perfected over the years. A second chance, I thought, the words echoing in my mind. A second chance to... what? The elation quickly morphed into something darker, something sharper. Rage. It simmered in my gut, a burning ember refusing to be extinguished. They'd taken my health, my childhood, my very life. And for what? So they could throw a lavish party while I lay dying? No, no more. This time, things would be different. This time, I wouldn't be a victim. The seed of a plan began to sprout in my mind. delicate at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. I wouldn't stay. I wouldn't beg. I would leave. I would build a life so far removed from them that they wouldn't even recognize me. They would regret what they'd done, not with grand dramatic gestures of revenge, but with the quiet, absolute power of my absence. The door creaked open, and my mother walked in. Her face was etched with the same weary impatience it always had been. "Anna, you're awake," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any real emotion. "Don't make a mess. We have guests coming." She glanced at me dismissively, her eyes lingering for a moment on something. Was it surprise? No, probably just annoyance that I was up and about. "Yes, mother," I replied, my voice meek, obedient. The sickly Anna they knew and tolerated. I even managed a small, weak cough for good measure. It was a performance, a carefully crafted facade. Inside, I was seething, but I wouldn't let them see it. Not yet. Let them think I was still the same. Let them underestimate me. It would be their undoing. I watched her leave, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. The game had begun. The charade continued. I played the part of the convalescent child, weak and dependent, while secretly I was a whirlwind of activity. My newfound health was a gift, and I intended to use it. Mornings were spent resting, which actually meant I was doing light exercises, building stamina, regaining lost muscle. Afternoons were for reading, which involved devouring books on finance, law, and survival skills. I even managed to sneak in some online courses on basic coding and web design. One never knew what skills might prove useful. My demeanor had subtly shifted. I was quieter, more observant. I listened more than I spoke, absorbing the conversations around me, noting the cracks in their carefully constructed facade of affluence and happiness. My brother, ever the bore, bragged about his latest conquests, oblivious to the eye rolls from my parents. My sister, now officially engaged, preened and simpered, her conversations revolving solely around wedding plans and designer dresses. They were all so predictable, so transparent. It was almost comical. "Anna, darling, could you fetch my shawl?" my mother would coo, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I'd dutifully retrieve it, offering a small, polite smile. "Thank you, dear," she'd say, already turning away, her attention fixed on some magazine. "Your grades are slipping, Anna," my father would rumble, his brow furrowed in a performative frown. "You need to focus more on your studies and less on whatever it is you do in your room all day." "Yes, father," I'd murmur, my gaze lowered. Inside, I was laughing. Studies? They had no idea what I was truly studying. The most crucial part of my plan was the money. Small amounts at first birthday gifts I'd squirreled away. Allowance money I'd saved by pretending I didn't have much of an appetite. Every coin was a symbol of my future freedom, a tiny rebellion against their control. I hid it all in an old book, hollowed out and placed innocuously on my shelf. "Anna, have you seen my mother began one afternoon, rummaging through a drawer. "No, mother," I replied, my voice perfectly neutral. I knew exactly where it was. She'd borrowed it weeks ago and never returned it. It was a game we played, a silent battle of wills. "Never mind," she sighed, giving up easily. She never really cared about the things themselves, only the power they represented. My interactions with them were purely transactional. I answered their questions, performed my sickly child routine, and observed them with a detached amusement that bordered on contempt. They thought I was still the same Anna, the weak, dependent one. They were wrong. So very wrong. And that was precisely what I was counting on. The day arrived like any other. Overcast, a slight drizzle threatening to turn into a full-blown downpour. Perfect weather for a vanishing act, I thought wryly. I packed my meager belongings, a few clothes, my precious books, and of course the hollowed-out book filled with my savings. No dramatic confrontations, no tearful goodbyes. Just a quiet, efficient exit. I left a note on the kitchen table, addressed to my parents. It wasn't accusatory, not exactly, more of a polite farewell. "Dear Mother and Father," I wrote, my hand surprisingly steady. "Thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. I've decided it's time for me to start my own life, to pursue my own path. I know I haven't been the easiest child, and I appreciate your patience and understanding. I wish you all the best. Sincerely, Anna. A final subtle jab disguised as gratitude. They wouldn't get it, of course. They'd just skim it, relieved to be rid of the burden. As they so eloquently put it, I slipped out of the house while they were still asleep, the sound of their snores a familiar, comforting lullaby. Comforting for me, at least, I thought, a small smile playing on my lips. It wasn't until mid-morning that they discovered my absence. My mother, naturally, was the first to notice. "Where's Anna?" she called out, her voice laced with annoyance. "She hasn't taken her medicine." Uh, Probably still sleeping, my father grumbled, not bothering to look up from his newspaper. "Let her be. We'll have some peace and quiet for once." They didn't even check my room until lunchtime. My mother went in, expecting to find me curled up in bed, as usual. She emerged a few minutes later, her face pale. "The note?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. My father snatched the note from her hand, his eyes scanning the words. A flicker of something crossed his face. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. More like surprise, and then a dawning realization. "The money," he said, his voice tight. "The money for her care. It's gone." My mother gasped. "But how?" She must have been planning this," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. "That little sneak." They were worried now, I could tell. Not about me, not really, but about the money. The money they'd lost, the money they'd counted on. The first crack in their self-satisfaction. The first hint that maybe, just maybe, they'd underestimated me. And that, I thought, as I walked away from the only home I'd ever known, was just the beginning. The city was a cacophony of sounds and smells, a stark contrast to the quiet, stifling atmosphere of my old home. It was overwhelming, yes, but in a good way. A liberating way. My first few days of freedom were a whirlwind of navigating unfamiliar streets, figuring out public transport, and trying to stretch my meager savings as far as they could go. There were moments of panic, moments of doubt, but beneath it all, a steady current of excitement pulsed through me. I was free. Truly, utterly free. My first refuge was a small, unassuming boarding house in a slightly run-down but surprisingly vibrant neighborhood. Mrs. Petrov, the landlady, was a gruff but kind woman with a heart of gold. She saw something in me, I think. A spark of determination, perhaps? Or maybe just a fellow soul who needed a helping hand. "You're a quiet one," she said, her eyes twinkling. "But I can see there's fire in you, little bird. Don't let it be extinguished." She gave me a discounted rate on a small room, a tiny space that was mine and mine alone. It was more than I'd had in years. It was home. My days were filled with a flurry of activity. I found a part-time job at a local library, shelving books and helping patrons. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me access to an endless supply of knowledge. I devoured books on everything and anything: literature, history, science, business. I was a sponge, soaking up every bit of information I could find. Evenings were dedicated to my studies, online courses, self-taught skills, and exploring the city. I discovered hidden gems, small cafes with live music, art galleries tucked away in back alleys, parks where I could simply sit and breathe, enjoying the simple pleasure of being alive. "You're always working so hard, Anna," Mrs. Petrov would say, clucking her tongue. "You need to have some fun, too." "I am having fun, Mrs. Petrov," I'd reply, a genuine smile gracing my lips. "I'm learning, I'm growing. This is what I was meant to do." My transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. I shed the victim mentality like an old, worn-out coat. I was no longer the sickly, dependent girl. I was Anna, independent, capable, and determined to make my own way in the world. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," Mrs. Petrov confided one evening as we shared a cup of tea in her cozy kitchen. "Full of dreams, full of fire. Don't let anyone dim your light, Anna. Not ever." "I won't," I said, my voice firm. "I promise." The past was still there, a shadow lurking in the corners of my mind. But it no longer defined me. It was a part of my story, yes, but it wasn't the whole story. I was writing a new chapter now, a chapter filled with hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief in my own potential. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt happy, truly, deeply happy. The kind of happiness that comes from within, from the knowledge that you are finally, truly yourself. Hard work. That was the key. No magic wands, no fairy godmothers. Just good old-fashioned grit and determination. My part-time library job had blossomed into something more. My passion for books, coupled with my newfound tech skills, led me to propose a modernization project, digitizing the library's catalog, creating an online database, and even designing a user-friendly website. They were hesitant at first, naturally. A quiet, bookish girl like you, handling all this tech? I heard whispered, but I persisted. I presented a detailed proposal, outlining the benefits, the costs, and the timeline. And they agreed, because I'd proven I could. The project was a resounding success. The library's patronage soared, and I found myself promoted to a newly created position, digital resources manager. It was a small step, perhaps, but it was my step, a step I'd taken on my own. My success didn't go unnoticed. I started networking, attending industry events, and connecting with people who shared my passion for knowledge and innovation. I built a new support system, genuine friendships, professional connections, people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. It was a refreshing change from the transactional relationships of my past. "You've got a real talent for this, Anna," a fellow librarian, Sarah, said one evening over coffee. "You're not just organized, you're creative, you have a vision." "Thank you, Sarah," I replied, genuinely touched. I love learning. I love connecting people with information." "Well, you're doing a fantastic job," she said, raising her cup. "To the future." "To the future?" I echoed, a smile spreading across my face. My confidence grew with each accomplishment. I was no longer the timid, sickly girl hiding in the shadows. I was strong, capable, and self-assured. I carried myself differently, my head held high, my gaze direct. I spoke with conviction, my voice clear and steady. I was no longer afraid to take risks, to voice my opinions, to be myself. "Anna, I've heard great things about your work at the library." A local businessman, Mr. Thompson, said at a networking event, "You have a real knack for digital innovation." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," I replied, extending my hand. "I'm always looking for new challenges." He smiled. "Well, I might have just the thing." It was a subtle shift, but it was there. People were starting to notice me, not as the sickly girl or the quiet one, but as Anna, a woman with talent, drive, and a bright future. I was making a name for myself, and it was only the beginning. The world, it seemed, had a funny way of shrinking when you least expected it. My family, cocooned in their bubble of privileged indifference, were not immune to the tendrils of gossip. Whispers of my success started to reach them, subtle at first, easily dismissed. "Someone saw a girl who looked like Anna at the library." Or, "Did you hear about that young woman who revolutionized the city library system? Apparently, she's some kind of tech whiz." My brother, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "Anna, please, she can barely turn on a computer." My sister, preoccupied with her upcoming nuptials, simply waved a dismissive hand. "Probably just a coincidence. Besides, who cares? She's gone. Good riddance." My parents, however, were not so easily convinced. They'd always been attuned to the currents of social standing, the subtle shifts in power and influence, and the whispers were becoming louder, more persistent. "That Anna girl, the one who left, apparently she's doing quite well for herself." Or, "Heard she's working for some big-shot businessman now, making a real name for herself." The unease started to creep in, a slow, insidious poison seeping into their carefully constructed world. It wasn't just the financial loss, though that certainly stung. It was the loss of a potential asset. The sickly girl they'd written off had become someone successful, someone admired, someone they could have used. We should have kept a closer eye on her," my mother lamented one evening, her voice laced with regret. "What good would that have done?" my father retorted, his tone sharp. "She was always going to be a burden, a drain on our resources." But now, my mother trailed off. her eyes filled with a mixture of envy and resentment. Now she could have been useful. She could have helped us. They tried to find me, of course, but I'd covered my tracks well. A new apartment, a new name, a new online presence carefully curated to project the image I wanted. They sent messages, made calls, even hired a private investigator. All dead ends. I was a ghost, a shadow flitting just beyond their grasp. And as their efforts proved futile, the regret deepened. They started to question their past actions, their neglect, their indifference. But it wasn't true remorse, not really. It was the regret of a gambler who'd folded a winning hand too soon, the regret of a businessman who'd missed a lucrative opportunity, the regret of a family who discarded a valuable asset without realizing its worth. Their regret was not about me. It was about them. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying revenge of all. It was a Saturday afternoon, the sun shining with mocking cheerfulness, when they finally found me. I was browsing a bookstore, enjoying the quiet hum of turning pages and the smell of old paper, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there they were. My family. Looking, well, not exactly contrite, but certainly putting on a good show of it. "Anna?" my mother gasped, her eyes widening in feigned surprise. "Is it really you?" "Mother?" I acknowledged, my voice calm, even. No hugs, no exclamations of joy. Just a polite nod. "Oh, darling," she continued, her voice trembling with faux emotion. "We've been so worried. Where have you been? We've missed you so much." My father stepped forward, his expression a carefully crafted mask of concern. "Anna, we're so sorry. We didn't realize how much we needed you. We want you to come home." I raised an eyebrow, a small, amused smile playing on my lips. "Home?" I echoed, the word tasting strange on my tongue. "To what? More neglect? More indifference?" "No, no, darling," my mother rushed to say, her hand fluttering to my arm. "It's different now. We've changed. We realize how much we wronged you." My siblings, ever the followers, chimed in with their own rehearsed lines. "We miss you, Anna," my brother mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "It's not the same without you," my sister added, her voice saccharine sweet. I observed them, my eyes taking in their forced smiles, their carefully rehearsed words. They were good, I'll give them that, but not good enough. I saw through their act, their desperation thinly veiled beneath a veneer of concern. "Why now?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "Why, after all these years, do you suddenly want me back?" My father cleared his throat, his eyes shifting nervously. "Well, we need your help, Anna, your expertise, your connections." There it was. The truth. They didn't miss me, they didn't regret their actions, they needed me. My skills, my influence, my newfound success, I was no longer a burden, but an asset. How convenient. "I see," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "So, it's not about love or regret? It's about what I can do for you?" They exchanged uneasy glances, their carefully constructed facade crumbling. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand, silencing her. "Thank you," I said, my voice laced with a hint of irony. "Thank you for teaching me the most valuable lesson of all, the value of independence, the value of self-reliance, the value of walking away." Tut. And with that, I turned and walked out of the bookstore, leaving them standing there, speechless. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter as I stepped back onto the street, the city noises a symphony of freedom. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. My past was behind me, and my future stretched out before me, limitless and bright. The silence that followed my departure was deafening. My family stood frozen in the bookstore, their carefully rehearsed performance shattered. The weight of their failure, their misjudgment, pressed down on them with the force of a physical blow. My mother, always the most volatile, was the first to break. She just walked away," she sputtered, her voice laced with disbelief and indignation. "After all we did for her?" "Did for her?" my father scoffed, his tone bitter. "We did nothing for her. And now we're paying the price." My siblings, ever the opportunists, quickly joined in the blame game. "It's your fault," my brother snarled at my parents. "You never treated her right." "She was always a burden," my sister retorted, her voice shrill. "We're better off without her." The argument escalated, their voices echoing through the quiet bookstore, drawing curious stares from other patrons. It was a scene they were all too familiar with. The blame, the recriminations, the desperate attempts to justify their own actions. But this time, it was different. This time, there was no scapegoat, no easy target. This time, they had to face the consequences of their own neglect. In the days and weeks that followed, the cracks in their carefully constructed facade widened into gaping chasms. The financial difficulties they'd been trying to hide worsened. My father's business ventures faltered, his reputation tarnished by whispers of his poor judgment and questionable ethics. My mother's social standing plummeted, her once loyal friends distancing themselves from the family's drama. My siblings, sensing the impending doom, turned on each other, their petty squabbles escalating into full-blown battles. The family unit, once a source of pride and stability, crumbled into a chaotic mess of resentment and recrimination. "We need to fix this," my father declared one evening, his voice heavy with desperation. "We need to get Anna back." "But how?" my mother wailed, her face etched with worry lines. "She won't even speak to us." "We need to find a way," he insisted, his eyes glinting with a desperate determination. "We need her connections, her influence. She's the only one who can save us now." The irony was not lost on me. They discarded me, neglected me, treated me like a burden. And now they needed me. They needed the very person they'd pushed away. News of their struggles reached me through the grapevine. Whispers in the library, hushed conversations at networking events, subtle hints from concerned acquaintances. I listened, observed, and felt a strange sense of detachment. It wasn't satisfaction, not exactly, more like a quiet vindication. I was thriving. My career was flourishing, my social circle expanding, my life filled with purpose and joy. I had everything they'd ever wanted, everything they'd tried so hard to achieve. And I had it without them. The girl they'd called a burden had become the woman they desperately needed. But I didn't need them. I had built my own empire, my own support system, my own happiness. And that, I realized, was the ultimate revenge. Life had a rhythm now, a beautiful, flowing melody that resonated with my soul. My days were filled with purpose and passion. The library had become my second home, a place where I nurtured my love for knowledge and shared it with others. I'd spearheaded new initiatives, literacy programs for underprivileged children, digital workshops for seniors, and even a coding club for teenagers. Seeing their eyes light up with newfound knowledge, their confidence blossom with each accomplishment, filled me with a sense of joy I'd never known before. My evenings were spent with friends, real friends, the kind who celebrated your victories and offered a shoulder to lean on during setbacks. Sarah, my colleague from the library, had become my confidant, my partner in crime. We explored the city together, shared our dreams and fears, and laughed until our sides ached. I even reconnected with an old school friend, Emily, who, to my surprise, had become a social worker. We found common ground in our passion for helping others, our shared understanding of the struggles some faced behind closed doors. "You've come a long way, Anna," Emily remarked one evening as we sipped wine at a cozy cafe. "You're glowing." "I am happy," I admitted, a warmth spreading through me. Truly happy. For it wasn't just my career and social life that flourished. I'd found a passion for photography, capturing the beauty of the city through my lens. My photos were exhibited in local galleries, even winning a few small awards. It was a way to express myself, to share my unique perspective with the world. And through it all, the shadow of my past gradually faded. It wasn't that I forgot or forgave my family. It was more that I released them from the power they'd held over me for so long. I realized that their actions were a reflection of their own limitations, their own insecurities. It wasn't about me. It never was. The real closure came from within, from accepting myself, flaws and all, from forgiving myself for the years I'd wasted trying to earn their love, their approval, from recognizing that I was enough, just as I was. One quiet evening, as I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle, I reflected on my journey, the pain, the betrayal, the struggle, but also the resilience, the growth, the triumph. My past had shaped me, yes, but it didn't define me. It had made me stronger, more independent, more determined to live a life filled with purpose and joy. And for that, I was grateful. I looked up at the stars, a million tiny pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. I was just one small being in this immense universe, but I had a place, a purpose. I was no longer the girl who'd been defined by her illness, her family, her past. I was Anna, unburdened, free, and finally truly alive. My story, once whispered in hushed tones, started to spread. It began with a local newspaper article about the library's transformation, with a small sidebar about the young woman who made it all happen. Then came a feature in a city magazine, highlighting my photography and my journey to finding my voice. And then a TEDx talk where I shared my story of resilience and reinvention, my message of empowerment resonating with an audience far beyond my city limits. People reached out, emails, letters, messages on social media. Stories of struggle, of overcoming adversity, of finding the strength to break free from toxic relationships and pursue their dreams. I became a symbol of hope, a testament to the human spirit's ability to heal and thrive. Your story gave me the courage to leave, a young woman wrote, her words etched with gratitude. I finally realized I deserved better than the life I was living. I never thought I could be anything more than what my family told me I was, a man shared, his message filled with newfound confidence. But you showed me that I can create my own destiny. These messages, these stories, fueled my desire to do more. I partnered with Emily, my social worker friend, to establish a foundation dedicated to supporting people who had experienced family neglect or abuse. We offered resources, counseling, and a safe space to heal and rebuild. It was a way to give back, to pay it forward, to create a ripple effect of positive change in the world. The foundation thrived, growing beyond our wildest dreams. We secured grants, attracted volunteers, and partnered with other organizations to expand our reach. We organized workshops, support groups, and even a summer camp for children who had experienced trauma. Seeing them laugh, play, and simply be children, their eyes filled with a newfound sense of safety and belonging, was a reward beyond measure. Years passed, the city skyline evolved, new buildings rising like aspirations, reaching for the sky. And I evolved with it. My hair, once a dull brown, now had streaks of silver, a testament to the passage of time and the wisdom it had brought. My face, once etched with the lines of worry and resentment, now held a serene calmness, a reflection of the peace I'd found within. One warm spring evening, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Foundation's new headquarters. The city lights spread out before me like a tapestry of dreams. Beside me stood Sarah, Emily, and a handful of other close friends. My chosen family. We raised our glasses in a toast, celebrating another milestone, another victory. To Anna, Sarah said, her eyes sparkling with affection, the woman who taught us all how to rise from the ashes. To Anna, Emily echoed, her voice filled with warmth, the woman who showed us that strength and compassion can coexist. To Anna, the others chimed in, their voices blending in a chorus of love and admiration. I smiled, my heart overflowing with gratitude. I looked out at the city, my city, the place where I'd found my freedom, my purpose, my true self. The ultimate power move, I realized, wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about walking away from the negativity, the toxicity, the limitations that others had tried to impose on me. It was about building a life filled with purpose, joy, and unwavering independence. It was about becoming the woman I was always meant to be. And as I stood there, surrounded by the people who loved and supported me, I knew that I had finally achieved it. I was no longer defined by my past, but by my strength, my compassion, and my unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit to heal and thrive. I was Anna, and I was free.